Hello and happy Wednesday. Yesterday was my birthday, and I'm so appreciative of those who reached out with a little message of congratulations, condolences, whatever it may be. Thank you for those wishes. It's great to be alive. We have so much to be thankful for. And I just want to share just a word in continuation of what I started last week in thinking about the blessing of differentness and how to appreciate the differentness God has built into us as humans. And I was reading from Matthew chapter 19, verse 4, which quotes the passage I quoted last week, Genesis 1:27. And in this passage in Matthew 19, Jesus was asked by Pharisees about divorce. And of course, Pharisees, like pretty much all teachers of the law in the Jewish days of Jesus, would refer to Moses as being the primary authority on what was right and what was wrong. And they quoted to Jesus how Moses had given permission to their forefathers to divorce their wives if they needed to. And perhaps trying to trap Jesus, they asked him if this is okay. Jesus took them one step further. Instead of appealing to Moses, Jesus appealed to creation, to Genesis 1:27. That God made humans male and female. And then from what happened after in Genesis 2, the story of the creation of Adam and Eve, how the man left father and mother, is the quotation there, and is joined into his wife. And Jesus says, whatever God has joined together, let no one separate. God has made us with differentness. Male and female is the metaphorical way of thinking there in Genesis 1:27 and in this story about divorce. But it's this idea that God has built into us differentness. And the very fact that we are different can sometimes tempt us to want to cut out one part of that differentness and only live with sameness. This is the problem of the Pharisees. They lived in a male-dominated world in which only the needs of men were considered. And so for Jesus to say, look, God has built in to creation maleness and femaleness is something that God has put together. Stop trying to separate those things, Jesus said. And I think this is metaphorically a way of us thinking about the fact that we as human beings are very diverse. God has made us diverse. We're not simply one stereotype. We're not one prototype. We are various types that God has designed us with these differences. And this differentness can be problematic in the sense that it can be challenging to make it all work together. But it's God who has put us together. We have to keep it together. That's our work. I was thinking about gardens, and there's a couple of examples about this differentness. Gardens, to me, are so beautiful when you walk through a beautifully designed backyard garden or through a public space, public park that has been designed. And to me, what I love about gardens is the diversity of plants. You'll see these various plants put together in such a way that they harmonize or blend with one another. I remember one of the most beautiful parks we've ever walked through is the Průhonice Gardens outside Prague. It's a beautiful space with water and trees and bushes and flowers. Such an amazing mix of plants. It's that beautiful mix with flowers that bloom in different seasons. That mix is just so amazing. And then to see the trees in the fall and the blooms in the spring. Oh, just amazing. There's a little plant called a boxwood bush. You've probably seen it. You may have some in your own backyard. Boxwood bush is a pretty standard, simple bush, which is used as an accent piece, or in some cases like a little bit of a boundary piece. It's nothing fancy about the boxwood bush, but in complementing other plants, it's a great little piece in a garden. But can you imagine going into somebody's backyard? They're bragging about their garden. Going into their backyard garden and seeing a backyard filled with just boxwood bushes. Wouldn't you kind of scratch your head about a garden of just boxwood bushes? Doesn't seem that beautiful to have one plant be the only plant that dominates an entire garden. But sometimes that's the way we as humans think we ought to operate. That life will somehow be better if we cut out those who are different. If we only congregate, if we only gather with, if we only talk to people who think like us, who act like us, who look like us. That kind of monotonous world is not a very exciting world. One of the movies that stuck with me the most, that made an impact on me, is a Polish film filmed during the final days of communism called Sex Mission. The title sounds a little provocative, I know, but this movie was a commentary about communism, and they were able to do artistic things in certain ways that communist leaders who were rather thick-headed didn't quite get the message. But this movie is about a world that's an underground world of only women. And the women who live there underground live there because there's been a nuclear holocaust above ground. And the perpetrators of this horrible disaster above ground were the men who controlled the world. And so the women now who've survived, who run this underground, very sophisticated world, they have created this way of thinking that men are evil and are to be totally eradicated. And so they've created a world where there's no men and no need for men. Even reproduction is done without men. But the movie turns on this little piece, that there's these two hibernation pods, these two scientists, males, had been put to sleep above ground before all this Holocaust, and were supposed to be reawakened after a few months. But of course, with all the stuff up above ground, they were forgotten. And then the women discover these hibernation pods and open them up and bring the two men back. And this shock to the system of suddenly having two men in the underground world is almost too much for the women to take. And so they actually are going to try to get rid of these men, or at least get rid of their maleness. That's the whole plot of the movie here, is what happens with all this. But just imagine that this world exists without the diversity that God has made us with. Imagine what that life would be like. If we just simply had people who thought one way politically. If we only had a world where we have people who are only scientific minded or only creatively minded. Just imagine that kind of world where there is no diversity, no differentness. God has made us with differentness for a reason. What God has put together, no one should separate. So I want to encourage you to be thankful for the diversity in our world among humans. The diversity among your family members, among your friends. There are different ways of seeing things, of viewing things, of thinking about what we should do, what our priorities are. Those aren't just simply things that people have come up with in their heads. Those are sometimes things that have been programmed deep within us. And we as humans can benefit the most. We can thrive the best when we lean into the differentness that God has made us with. When we do that, life will be incredibly beautiful. So grateful for you taking a minute to listen. Have a great day.